All right, in addition, I'll also teach you how to interpret the data. For example, if the right side is 90 and the left side is 80, it means the left side is providing support. So which side is supporting? At that time, which side's ribs are closed? The ribs on the opposite side are open, right? Relatively speaking, I'll teach you how to distinguish between support and weight bearing. If the ribs on the supporting side are closed and at the same time your heart rate is low and at the same time your ilium on this side is also in retroversion, and compared to the opposite side your calcaneus on this side does not show a relatively obvious shortening, then this could indicate that it has a weight bearing function. But if you are pressing on this side, however, even though your heart rate is low, your calcaneus is in varus, but when you raise your hand, the ribs on this side are also flared outward. However, your hand is sweating and your blood pressure is unstable. So in this case, it is generally supporting rather than weight bearing. Usually it's a false support. For true weight bearing, the function from the inside out on that side is normal. For example, everything is relatively normal. Your joint mobility, you don't have pain on this side, your posture is good, and then your heart rate, your blood pressure, your breathing, and your lung capacity are all relatively better on this side. That's weight bearing. So now, in most cases, you encounter when both cards are biased towards smoothness, that smoothness is actually false. Because you'll notice that on the inner side, things like body temperature, lung capacity, heart rate, blood pressure, and even joint mobility fluctuate quite a lot. So at this point, if you want to adjust the function of the internal organs, you need to distinguish between these things. For example, if this person has unstable blood sugar, poor digestive function, impaired liver function, or issues with emotional regulation, these factors determine which side you should train for them. Of course, if they clearly tell you that their digestive function is poor, that they often feel bloated or burp after eating, and are always taking a lot of stomach medicine, then it's very likely that there's an issue on the left side. In that case, you can have them train their left foot. But if it's a child or a woman, if they're always getting angry, constantly looking for arguments with others, and always making trouble out of nothing, then most likely their liver isn't in good condition. Their liver function, because the liver is affected by emotions, people who are often angry usually have poor liver health, and those with poor liver health also tend to get angry easily. People with a bad temper generally have liver problems. So in most cases, you need to train the weight-bearing ability of their right foot, and most likely you need to work on the right heel. But sometimes their heart might not be good, their liver might not be good, or their kidneys might not be good. In these situations, you might not know exactly how to train them. In that case, training both heels is never wrong. Basically, you can't go wrong with that. The key is to figure out which side is weaker. Therefore, the greater the difference in size between the heels, the greater the difference in function between the internal organs. The more disordered the function of the internal organs, the greater the difference in their form, especially when there is no muscular compensation. This is assuming there is no compensation. Some people have a large difference in heel size, but the muscles above are very well developed, so they can use their muscles to compensate. So, besides looking good, one of the most powerful functions of our muscles is their ability to compensate. Because I have always maintained a lot of muscle, I can use advanced functions to compensate. When our body doesn't have any advanced means of compensation, we can only rely on some lower level functions to compensate. So what are lower level functions? Basically, the functions that keep your body operating normally all fall under lower level functions. For example, knowing when you feel cold, when you feel hot, when you need to sweat, when you need to urinate, when you need to have a bowel movement, when you need to sleep, your breathing, your heart rate, all of these. All of these are lower level functions. So what kind of people are most likely to have underdeveloped lower level functions? Those who never exercise and have no muscle. Then their life is very monotonous. And if, on top of that, there are some issues with their family of origin, such people not only experience pain all over their bodies, but their internal organ functions are also a complete mess. Furthermore, their emotions and mental state are very abnormal. This is a very typical case of compensating with internal organs, emotions, and mental state. People like this are labeled by us as having somatization or SOC. That's how it comes about. So for people like this, after they train their muscles, all of these issues will improve. The reason they get better is that you're letting them use some of their muscular functions instead, so that his internal organs and mental state are no longer being used for compensation. He won't rely so much on his internal organs and mental state to compensate or to distribute the load proportionally. That's why we encourage them, whether women or the elderly, to do some strength training. Because when you really have problems with your legs, you still have something else in your body that can compensate. So for people who have issues with their internal organs, generally speaking, for those with poor digestive function, they shouldn't eat too much meat because their stomach and intestines aren't that strong to begin with. However, if you train your muscles and your muscles become more developed, even though you're eating more meat than before, previously you couldn't absorb it. But now, as your ability to break down muscle fibers improves, you're able to absorb it, and your stomach's function will also improve accordingly. I've received messages from many parents saying, I give my child sea cucumber every day. Every morning, I cook 2 sea cucumbers and put them in a boiled egg. So I just want him to gain some weight, but the child just doesn't put on any. No matter how much he eats, he doesn't get fat. What does this actually mean? He doesn't have a deficiency. After he eats, these things aren't absorbed. You've never challenged his muscles, and all of his digestive organs, his stomach, intestines, pancreas, even his liver, are under pressure. And then his feet are in terrible shape. After he eats, of course, he doesn't gain weight. So if you correct his feet, relieve the compression on his internal organs, and also challenge his muscles a bit, then all the functions of his internal organs will instantly feel dramatically different. He'll even feel his mental state improve. Then the blood flow and oxygen supply to the brain improve, and his academic performance gets better too. It's really that simple. You just need to understand the reasoning behind it. So the greater the difference in size between your left and right heels, the greater the difference in your diaphragm as seen on an X-ray, and the flatter your diaphragm will be. The bigger the difference. The logic is this: the smaller and more inverted the heel on one side, the flatter the diaphragm on that side. The ratio works like this: they are directly proportional. So whichever side has the smaller heel, that side's diaphragm is flatter. If you come up and look, for many people, isn't the left heel smaller than the right? Weren't the 2 people with nearsightedness who came up today both having a much smaller left heel? So this is why you see on the X-ray that the left diaphragm is flatter and lower, because the smaller it is below, the less support there is, and the more it sacrifices the breathing function of the upper respiratory muscles, turning them into stabilizers instead. So basically, for people whose left heel is smaller, their digestive function is generally not good, and their heart rate, their resting heart rate, tends to fluctuate more dramatically. This is a pattern. Your left foot bears 35% of your body weight, which is half of the total 70% when both feet are supporting you. So if during walking your right foot steps forward and your left foot is supporting, then the left foot is bearing 70% of the weight. So after this 70% function has degenerated, the body has to find its own way to compensate. The diaphragm is a very important muscle for stabilizing the thorax. When your feet are unstable and your thorax is not stable, the diaphragm will inevitably sacrifice its breathing function to help stabilize your thorax. Therefore, whenever it is responsible for stabilization, its contraction will always be stronger than when it is responsible for inhalation. As long as its contraction is strong, it will become flatter. So what we see in imaging is that the left diaphragm is lower. Apart from the fact that the stomach is lighter than the liver, it's also because innately the heavier right side presses down on the right. Therefore, my right heel is better at supporting than my left. Over time, if our left heel doesn't provide support, it will become smaller and smaller. In this situation, the diaphragm on that side will get lower and lower. So if you train your left heel to be a bit stronger, your left diaphragm will rise a bit as well. You can go back and take a look. You can even get an X-ray to see for yourself. The key is that after you've strengthened your left heel, you need to be able to maintain it. Don't let it be that you build it up in today's class, but by tomorrow it's shrunk again. Today it's strong, tomorrow it's weak. If that's the case, the upper part won't improve either. You need to strengthen it and be able to keep it that way. At this point, your left diaphragm may be able to rise because it no longer needs to compensate for stability. This is the relationship with the internal organs. As long as your diaphragm is lower on one side, all the organs below that side of the diaphragm are compressed. Whenever they're squeezed together, their function is affected. This is why so many people now have issues with blood sugar, heart rate, and blood pressure. Because for most people today, the left heel has become smaller and the heart and stomach are on the left side. The pancreas is also more to the left, and in addition, people are more likely to develop hemorrhoids on the left side than on the right, with more cases protruding from the left. So this corresponds exactly to the smaller left heel. That's why I say as long as your heel doesn't provide support, the diaphragm on the same side will sacrifice its breathing function to become a stabilizer instead. As long as it becomes a stabilizer, all the organs below its diaphragm will be compressed. Once compressed, all their functions will be affected. It's just that whichever area is weaker, symptoms will show up there first. That's the relationship between them. That's the logical relationship. So if your child is experiencing delayed height development and also has a smaller left calcaneus, then even if you take them to jump rope or play basketball, their stomach is still being compressed, its capacity is compromised, and their digestion and absorption are affected. So even if they jump rope, play basketball, and you supplement them with protein, they still won't grow taller. they still won't grow taller. Even though they're exercising, their nutrient absorption is still problematic. So in this situation, you need to train their heel so it can provide support, and then address the issue of compensatory stabilization caused by the upper respiratory muscles. By doing this, you relieve the compression and pressure on their internal organs. Once the internal organs are no longer compressed and deprived of blood, their function returns to normal. At this point, if you add exercise and provide nutritional supplements, then it's possible for them to grow taller. So just in our own neighborhood, there are kids who go to get growth hormone injections, but even after the injections, they still do not get taller. They just get broader, not taller. Many parents are very anxious about this. They're really worried. Their daughters are not even 1.6 meters tall, and their sons are not even 1.7 meters, and their growth plates are basically about to close. This kind of problem is becoming more and more common. In the past, it was due to malnutrition, but that is not the case anymore.